Amphetamines. Amphetamines are prescription stimulants sold as Adderall, Dexedrine, or Vyvanse, designed to treat ADHD and narcolepsy. But on the street, they're called speed, uppers, or study drugs. They're swallowed as pills, snorted as powder, or occasionally injected. Once they hit your system, amphetamines force your brain to dump massive amounts of dopamine and norepinephrine into your synapses. Not gradually, all at once. The onset arrives within minutes. Suddenly, you're laser-focused. Tasks that seemed impossible become easy. Conversation flows effortlessly. Your confidence skyrockets. Fatigue vanishes completely, replaced by sharp electric clarity. Students pull all-nighters. Workers power through double shifts. Everyone feels productive, capable, unstoppable. At the peak, you're operating at what feels like 200% capacity. Hours pass like minutes. You forget to eat, forget to drink water, forget everything except the task in front of you. Your pupils dilate, your jaw clenches, your heart hammers, but you don't care because you're finally getting things done. Then the comedown arrives, and it's brutal. The focus shatters into scattered thoughts. Energy collapses into bone-deep exhaustion. That confidence melts into anxiety, irritability, sometimes full paranoia. Your brain just burned through its entire dopamine supply, and now there's nothing left. Amphetamines are highly addictive, especially when used without medical supervision. Tolerance builds fast. The dose that worked yesterday barely touches you today. Over time, they damage your cardiovascular system, disrupt sleep patterns permanently, and can trigger psychosis that mimics schizophrenia. The productivity they promise comes with a price your brain pays long after the pill wears off. DXM, or dextromethorphan, is the active ingredient in over-the-counter cough syrup. At normal doses, it suppresses coughs. At high doses, it becomes a dissociative hallucinogen that separates your consciousness from your body. People call it robo-tripping because Robitussin is a common brand. It's chugged as syrup, swallowed as gel caps, or extracted into powder. The doses matter here. Low doses feel drunk and floaty. High doses send you somewhere else entirely. When DXM floods your system, it blocks NMDA receptors, the same targets as ketamine and PCP. The onset creeps in over 30 to 60 minutes. First, nausea hits, hard. Your stomach rebels against the syrup you just forced down. Then the numbness spreads. Your limbs feel distant, disconnected, like they belong to someone else. At the peak, reality fractures. You might experience closed-eye visuals, geometric patterns that pulse and breathe. Your sense of time collapses. Minutes stretch into hours. Conversations happen in slow motion. Music doesn't just sound different. It becomes a physical presence you can almost touch. Some users describe out-of-body experiences, watching themselves from across the room. The comedown is heavy and disorienting. Your thoughts move like they're underwater. Your speech slurs. Coordination stays broken for hours. The next day brings brain fog, lingering nausea, and a general sense that something in your head isn't quite right. DXM isn't physically addictive like opioids, but psychological dependency develops easily. Regular use damages memory, creates cognitive impairment, and can cause Olney's lesions, literal holes in your brain tissue. The cough syrup that sits on pharmacy shelves isn't harmless. It's a dissociative that can rewire your brain when abused. GHB, or gamma-hydroxybutyrate, exists in a strange legal space. It's prescribed as Xyrem for narcolepsy, but recreationally, it's a club drug known as liquid ecstasy, or liquid G. It's swallowed as a clear, salty liquid measured in capfuls or milliliters. The problem with GHB is the margin for error is terrifyingly small. The difference between a euphoric high and unconsciousness is often less than a milliliter. Once consumed, GHB enhances GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, while triggering dopamine release. The onset arrives fast, within 15 to 30 minutes. At the right dose, a warm wave of relaxation washes over you. Inhibitions dissolve, social anxiety evaporates. You feel confident, euphoric, intensely present. It's like the best parts of being drunk without the sloppiness. Music sounds better. Touch feels heightened. Conversations flow naturally. At the peak, users describe it as almost empathogenic, a sense of connection similar to MDMA, but shorter and more physical. You're relaxed but energized, calm but social. The high lasts 2 to 4 hours. But here's where it becomes dangerous. Add even slightly too much, and the experience flips completely. Speech becomes incomprehensible. Motor control vanishes. You might collapse mid-sentence, unconscious before you hit the ground. Breathing becomes shallow, dangerously shallow. Emergency rooms see GHB overdoses regularly, people found unresponsive at clubs or parties. The comedown, if you don't overdose, leaves you tired but relatively clear-headed. But with regular use, physical dependence develops fast. Withdrawal from chronic GHB use is severe, causing tremors, insomnia, anxiety, and potentially life-threatening seizures that require medical supervision. GHB promises euphoria and connection, but it delivers those things with a dose-response curve so steep that unconsciousness or death is always one mismeasured capful away. Kratom. Kratom is a tropical tree leaf from Southeast Asia, legal in most U.S. states, and sold at gas stations, smoke shops, and online. People brew it as tea, swallow capsules, or mix the powder into drinks. It sits in a strange category because at low doses, it acts like a stimulant. At high doses, it mimics opioids. The active compounds, mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, bind to opioid receptors in your brain, though less intensely than traditional opioids. The onset depends on your dose and tolerance. Within 20 to 30 minutes, effects begin. At stimulant doses, usually 1 to 5 grams, you feel more alert, focused, and energized. Pain decreases, motivation increases. It's like a milder, more functional version of coffee without the jitters. Many people use it to get through work, to enhance productivity, or to manage chronic pain. At higher doses, 5 to 15 grams, the opioid effects dominate. The peak brings warmth, relaxation, and mild euphoria. Pain disappears almost completely. Stress melts away. You feel comfortable, content, sedated, but not incapacitated. It's nowhere near as intense as prescription opioids, but the relief is real. The comedown is usually gentle. Energy fades, relaxation passes, and you return to baseline without much drama. But here's the trap. Daily use builds tolerance rapidly. What started as 2 grams becomes 5, then 10, then 20. And when you try to stop, withdrawal appears. It's milder than heroin withdrawal, but it's real. Sweating, muscle aches, insomnia, anxiety, restlessness, irritability. It lasts about a week, sometimes longer. Kratom is physically and psychologically addictive. People convince themselves it's harmless because it's legal and natural. But your brain doesn't care about legality. It only knows that opioid receptors are being activated, and when that stops, it demands more. Kratom sits in convenience stores next to energy drinks, but it's an opioid, and opioids always come with a cost. Inhalants. Inhalants are household chemicals, paint thinners, gasoline, glue, aerosol sprays, nitrous oxide, compressed air dusters. They're not drugs designed for human consumption. They're poisons. People breathe to get high. Kids use them because they're accessible, cheap, and legal to purchase. The method varies. Some huff directly from containers. Others spray into bags and breathe the fumes. Some soak rags and hold them over their face. What they're actually doing is suffocating their brain of oxygen while flooding it with toxic chemicals. The onset is almost immediate. Within seconds, lightheadedness hits. Vision blurs. Sounds become distorted and distant. A brief rush of euphoria washes through you, followed by disorientation and sometimes hallucinations. Your brain is literally being starved of oxygen and poisoned simultaneously. At the peak, which lasts only minutes, users describe feeling detached, floating, disconnected from reality. Everything seems funny or profound, but here's what's actually happening. Your neurons are dying, brain cells are suffocating, organs are being damaged. The comedown brings headaches, nausea, confusion, and lingering dizziness. But the real damage is cumulative and often irreversible. Regular inhalant use destroys brain tissue permanently. It damages the liver, kidneys, and heart. It kills bone marrow, causing irreversible immune system damage. Sudden sniffing death syndrome is real, where the heart simply stops mid-use, killing otherwise healthy people. There is no safe way to use inhalants. Every time someone huffs paint or gasoline, they're rolling dice with their life. The high lasts minutes. The brain damage lasts forever. Synthetic cannabinoids. Synthetic cannabinoids, sold as spice, K2, or synthetic marijuana, are lab-made chemicals sprayed onto plant material and packaged to look like incense or herbal blends. They're marketed as legal alternatives to cannabis, but they're nothing like it. The chemicals vary wildly between batches, making every use unpredictable and dangerous. These compounds are smoked like cannabis, but they're far more potent. They bind to the same cannabinoid receptors as THC, but with 100 times the intensity. The onset arrives within minutes. At first, it might feel similar to cannabis, relaxation, altered perception, maybe some euphoria, but then it escalates. At the peak, users report extreme anxiety, paranoia, rapid heart rate, and hallucinations. Not subtle distortions, full visual and auditory hallucinations. Reality fractures. Panic sets in. Some people become violent or catatonic. Emergency rooms see synthetic cannabinoid cases regularly, people seizing, unresponsive, or experiencing psychotic breaks. The come-down varies dramatically. Some people return to baseline within hours, shaken but functional. Others experience lingering anxiety, depression, or cognitive impairment that lasts days or weeks. Synthetic cannabinoids aren't addictive in the traditional sense, but psychological dependence develops quickly. The real danger is the unpredictability. One batch might be relatively mild, the next might send you to the hospital. Kidney damage, heart attacks, strokes, and deaths have all been linked to synthetic cannabinoid use. They're sold legally in some places, marketed as safe and natural. They're neither. They're untested chemicals manufactured in labs with zero quality control, sprayed onto plants, and sold to people who think they're getting something like weed. They're not. They're getting a poison that happens to get you high before it potentially kills you. PCP, or phencyclidine, also called angel dust, is a dissociative anesthetic that was abandoned for medical use because patients woke up psychotic. Recreationally, it's smoked, snorted, or injected, sometimes unknowingly mixed into other drugs. PCP has a terrifying reputation. Stories of superhuman strength, violent outbursts, people doing horrific things without memory or awareness. Some of those stories are exaggerated. Many are not. Once PCP enters your system, it blocks NMDA receptors aggressively, severing the connection between sensory input and emotional processing. The onset depends on the method. Smoked, it hits within minutes. Snorted or swallowed, it takes longer but lasts far longer, up to 24 hours or more. At low doses, the peak brings numbness, euphoria, and a floating sensation. Pain disappears completely. At higher doses, reality dissolves entirely. Users describe feeling invincible, detached from their body, unable to feel injuries or fear. This is where the danger multiplies. Someone on PCP might walk through a window without flinching because they don't register pain. They might fight police officers because fear doesn't exist. They might act violently, not out of aggression, but because emotional regulation has been completely shut down. The come-down can last days. Confusion, memory loss, paranoia, and sometimes persistent psychosis that doesn't resolve. PCP has a half-life of 21 hours, and it accumulates in fatty tissues, meaning it lingers in your system long after the high fades. PCP isn't physically addictive, but it's psychologically addictive and uniquely dangerous. The dissociation it creates is so profound that people lose the ability to assess danger, feel pain, or make rational decisions. The stories about PCP aren't just drug war propaganda. Some of them are real, and they're real because this drug doesn't just alter perception, it severs the connection between mind and survival instinct. Salvia. Salvia divinorum is a plant native to Mexico, legal in many places, sold in smoke shops as dried leaves or concentrated extracts. It's smoked from a pipe or bong, and the trip lasts only 5 to 15 minutes, but those minutes don't feel like a fun psychedelic experience. They feel like reality collapsing entirely. Salvia contains salvinorin A, which activates kappa opioid receptors in the brain. Unlike most drugs that flood you with pleasure, kappa receptors do the opposite. They create dysphoria, discomfort, and profoundly strange dissociation. The onset is instant and overwhelming. Within 30 seconds of smoking salvia, you forget you smoked anything. You forget you're a person. Reality doesn't just change, it gets replaced. At the peak, users report becoming inanimate objects. You might believe you're a table, a zipper, a page in a book being turned. Some feel like they're being pulled through dimensions or living entire lifetimes as someone else. There's no euphoria, no insight, no connection, just confusion and the overwhelming certainty that this will never end. Time collapses. What feels like hours is actually 2 minutes, then reality snaps back abruptly. The come down is disorienting. You remember who you are, where you are, that you exist. Most people are left disturbed, confused, with zero desire to repeat the experience. Salvia isn't addictive. Nobody wants to do it twice. It's not dangerous physically, but psychologically, it's profoundly unsettling. Trip reports consistently describe it as one of the most uncomfortable and bizarre experiences possible. Salvia doesn't offer wisdom or recreation. It offers a brief, terrifying glimpse into what it might feel like to stop being human, and then it lets you come back, shaken and questioning why anyone would ever willingly do that. Barbiturates. Barbiturates are sedatives that used to be prescribed widely for anxiety and sleep. Names like phenobarbital, secobarbital, and pentobarbital, but they've largely been replaced by benzodiazepines because barbiturates are far more dangerous. They're swallowed as pills, and they work by enhancing GABA, slowing brain activity dramatically. The onset arrives within 30 to 60 minutes. At first, it feels like relief. Anxiety dissolves, muscles relax, your thoughts slow down, your body softens, and sleep becomes effortless. At the peak, everything feels distant and calm. Worries fade. Time drifts. You're sedated, but not quite unconscious, floating in a comfortable haze where nothing matters. But here's the problem. The difference between a therapeutic dose and a lethal dose is incredibly small. Take slightly too much and your breathing slows dangerously. Your heart rate drops. You might slip into a coma and never wake up. Mix barbiturates with alcohol and the risk multiplies. Both depress the central nervous system, and together they can shut it down completely. The comedown, if you survive, brings grogginess, confusion, and lingering sedation that can last a full day. But with regular use, tolerance builds rapidly. What worked last week barely touches you this week. And here's the terrifying part. Barbiturate withdrawal is one of the most dangerous withdrawals that exists. Stopping suddenly after regular use can cause seizures, delirium, hallucinations, and death. Even medical detox is risky. Barbiturates are highly addictive, both physically and psychologically. They were replaced for good reason. They're effective sedatives, but they're also extraordinarily easy to overdose on, and withdrawal can kill you even when done carefully. DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, is the most intense psychedelic known. It exists naturally in certain plants and is the active compound in ayahuasca, but recreationally, it's synthesized as a powder or crystal and smoked. The trip lasts only 10 to 15 minutes, but those minutes feel like lifetimes. DMT is smoked from a pipe, and the moment you exhale, reality ends. The onset is instantaneous. Within seconds, your vision explodes into impossible geometry. Patterns made of light and color that don't exist in normal reality fill your field of vision. Your body disappears. The room disappears. Your sense of self dissolves completely. At the peak, you're no longer human. Some users report encountering entities, beings made of light or geometry that communicate through feelings rather than words. Others describe being propelled through tunnels or dimensions. There's no time. There's no you. There's only experience happening without anyone experiencing it. It's called ego death because the part of your brain that maintains your identity shuts down temporarily. Then, just as suddenly, it ends. The come down brings you back to normal reality. Within 5 to 10 minutes, you remember being a person. You remember your name. You're sitting where you started, but everything feels slightly unreal. Most people are left speechless, struggling to process what just happened. DMT isn't physically addictive, but it's psychologically intense. It's not fun. It's not recreational. It's a forced confrontation with the limits of human consciousness. Some people find it profoundly meaningful. Others find it terrifying. But everyone agrees, DMT doesn't show you something new. It strips away the filter your brain uses to create the illusion of stable reality, and for a few minutes you see what's underneath. Whether that's enlightenment or just your brain malfunctioning at maximum capacity is a question no one has answered. Steroids. Anabolic steroids are synthetic versions of testosterone, the hormone responsible for muscle growth, bone density, and male characteristics. They're injected, swallowed as pills, or absorbed through creams. Athletes use them to build muscle faster. Bodybuilders use them to push past natural limits. Some people use them to look better, feel stronger, or recover faster from injuries. But steroids don't just build muscle. They rewire your entire hormonal system. The onset isn't dramatic. There's no high, no rush, no immediate feeling. But within days or weeks, changes begin. Strength increases rapidly. Muscles grow faster than naturally possible. Recovery time after workouts shrinks. You feel more aggressive, more confident, more driven. At the peak, after weeks or months of use, the results are undeniable. Muscle mass explodes. Body fat drops. Physical performance reaches levels that would be impossible naturally, but the side effects accumulate silently. Acne spreads across your back and shoulders. Hair falls out. For men, testicles shrink as your body stops producing natural testosterone. For women, voices deepen permanently and facial hair grows. Both sexes experience liver damage, cardiovascular strain, and elevated cholesterol. The come down happens when you stop. Your body's natural testosterone production has been shut down, sometimes permanently. Depression hits hard, muscle mass vanishes rapidly, strength drops, and your hormonal system might never fully recover. Steroids are psychologically addictive, not because they feel good, but because stopping means losing everything you built. You become dependent on external hormones to maintain what you achieved. Steroid use isn't a shortcut, it's a trade. You exchange temporary physical dominance for permanent hormonal dysfunction, organ damage, and a body that forgot how to regulate itself. Nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is laughing gas, the same chemical dentists use to keep patients calm. Recreationally, people inhale it from whipped cream canisters or balloons at parties and festivals. The high lasts 30 seconds to a minute. It feels harmless, fun, silly. But those 30 seconds cut off oxygen to your brain. When you inhale nitrous, it floods your lungs and enters your bloodstream instantly. It blocks NMDA receptors and disrupts how your brain processes sensory information. The onset is immediate. Sound becomes distorted, muffled, like you're underwater. Your body feels weightless. A wave of euphoria rushes through you, and everything seems hilarious or profound. At the peak, reality bends briefly. Your sense of self wobbles. Some people describe a ringing sensation or the feeling of being pulled backward through space. Then it ends. Within 60 seconds, the world snaps back. You're slightly dizzy, disoriented, and immediately craving another hit. That's the trap. Because the high is so short, people inhale repeatedly, sometimes dozens of times in one session. Each time, your brain is oxygen deprived. Do it regularly, and nitrous depletes vitamin B12, which your nerves need to function. Long-term users develop numbness, difficulty walking, and permanent nerve damage. Nitrous isn't physically addictive, but it's psychologically compulsive. The brevity makes it feel safe. One hit becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, and while you're laughing at nothing, your nervous system is quietly breaking down, one 30-second hit at a time.